So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Before I get started, I just want to remind everyone that today's Zoom session is being recorded. So anyway, hi everyone. Welcome to our first ever educational peer support session. Navigating Gender Together is a program operated by Trans Emotion, a trans-led and trans-serving organization. Navigating Gender Together is a program that offers free gender-affirming garments like binders, gas, packers, shapewear, and breast forms to people who live in the California Central Valley. This program will also host other forms of support to trans folks in the form of online peer support sessions, and everything that this program is doing and will continue to do has been made possible by a grant from the California Department of Public Health. If you are interested in applying for a free gender affirming garment or subscribing to our email so that you can be the first to know about future educational sessions like this one, please visit our website, transemotion.com. And I'm going to take a second to type that into our chat right now.
Really amazing stuff.
Thank you. All right, this session is just the first in what's going to be an ongoing series of workshops and panel discussions facilitated by a trans person, today, me. And these sessions are intended for the trans community. Our guest speakers will generally include trans people or health professionals who specialize in our health. Today's speakers include two trans activists who have a lot of insight into how we can live positively and better process our emotions during difficult times, like the ones we might face in the next 4 years. So now, in a random order, I'm going to introduce our today's two panelists. Mars Wright, he, him, is a trans man, artist, streetwear designer, dancer, activist, and entrepreneur. His work touches on the beauty of imperfection and the strength of radical honesty. Through sharing his life vulnerably, he hopes to help folks feel less alone. His hashtag #TransJoyIsResistance has over 30 million views, including my own, and he's shown his designs in runway and gallery shows, a Google mini documentary, and more. Ben Greene is a transgender advocate and educator who has spoken internationally on topics surrounding transgender inclusion. After coming out at 15 in a small town, Ben has devoted his life to spreading empathy, education, and storytelling around the trans experience, and has spoken for companies, hospitals, schools, religious organizations, and government entities, sharing what it means to be transgender and how to show up as an ally. He is a fierce advocate for transgender youth, regularly speaking in their defense at the Missouri State Capitol, and is the author of the book My Child is Trans, Now What? A Joy-Centered Approach to Support. And the newsletter, he's also the author of the newsletter, Good Queer News. He is passionate about educating others from a place of compassion, no matter where they're starting from. And he also came highly recommended by Drew from P Flag Fresno. So we know we are in good hands with Ben. With both of our panelists, I'm now going to ask our panelists a series of questions. Mars and Ben, whoever feels ready to share may go first. So there's no particular order, just whoever feels like you're ready to start talking and responding to the question, go ahead and just jump in. And then if the other person happens to feel like they need a little more time to think about it, they can have that time. Um, and then only after we have finished with the scripted questions will we open up for Q&A from the audience. The scripted questions should last no more than about an hour, and the Q&A from the audience can last up to 30 minutes. So with that said, I will go ahead and get started. Our first question to our panelists today is, how do you feel the current political climate is affecting you personally?
I'm happy to jump in. I'm out here in Missouri, so a lot is the answer. Current is an interesting word because I had this moment after the election where I was like, oh my God, everything is going to be so bad. Like I had a life that was happy. Is it going to be okay? What's going to happen? And then I had this moment of like, Ben, I live in Missouri. I have spent the last 5 years living under a Republican supermajority, hell-bent on erasing me. Same circus, different clowns. The fact that I'm like, gosh, I'm gonna miss my life in what many people would consider a state that is hostile to hope, and has not been. So I'm reminding myself that, local politics impact us so much more than national politics. Obviously, there's a lot of national fears, But it affects me in a lot of ways, right? It affects my monitoring for my safety. It affects my livelihood, my career as a trans public speaker. I have a lot of government contracts that had to go in a folder for the next 4 years, knowing they're not going to call me back. Um, but I think the biggest thing I think about when it comes to the current political climate, particularly in Missouri, but also all over, people say, why don't you leave? Why can't you go somewhere? We have this expression of put on your oxygen mask first before helping others. And I think that's a good start, but I don't think it's that descriptive because if I'm on a plane and I can't get my mask to come on and I'm sitting next to Michael Phelps, that man is aquatic. He can hold his breath for like, I don't know, 10 minutes. He can help me put on my mask and nothing bad will happen to him. When we think about the current political climate, right, in Missouri right now, I live in St. Louis, which means I am right on the border of Illinois. So if we have an adult care ban, I know I can get across the river. And all our laws right now impact trans youth. I am not on state health insurance, I'm not incarcerated, and I have financial flexibility to travel, which means that it doesn't affect me the same way it affects trans kids, trans people of color, low income trans people, incarcerated trans people. So it affects me very differently. And so I'm really mindful of like, hey, I don't actually need my oxygen mask yet. I can hold my breath. I'm okay. I'm not being hurt or targeted in the same way that some of the other people in my community are. So it affects me and my stress, but it's important for me to remind myself that, like, yes, the target is on this community, but it's not exactly on me right now. So, what can I do to make an impact here while I am under the radar, while I can hold my breath? I know that answer went a lot of directions, and maybe it's maybe less focused. I don't know. That's for you to decide. But it's stressful, it's scary, and we just keep moving because forward is the only option.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy, Ben, of the mask. Mine,
Thanks.
I felt similar. Like when I saw what was happening with the election, it kind of felt like the worst breakup in the world when you're just so down bad that the only option is to like call your friends, you know? And that's like really what I felt. I felt like so many trans people like, it's hard to reach out. It's hard to build community, especially offline. I think we were talking about this a little bit, but I saw like so much real connection, like real texting, how are you? What's going on? How can we organize together? And Dean Spade is somebody that I really look up to. He's been posting so much and is releasing a book about how do we really handle shit when it's like down bad. I hope I can cuss. I think I can cuss. Um, but I think that is really how I'm feeling right now is how can I live every moment joyfully? How can I like really honor and uphold like the joy in the trans community? And also thinking about, I live in California, I live in Los Angeles. I think it's really important for trans people that are in places that are extremely not, I mean, everywhere is not perfectly safe, but we are much safer than a lot of other places for us to continue to carry on that hope and joy. Because I know that hope and joy was one of the few things that kept me alive when I was really, really down bad. And so I know that we have to continue. And I feel like it's my responsibility as an adult trans person that does get to, come home to my apartment that, I get to pay for with a family and like my dog and live this like normal, happy, normal. I'm still not normal, but I can, live like a pretty nice life. And I really didn't believe that was possible. So I don't know. I'm just leaning into community and like hope and joy, even though it's down bad, it's for sure not erasing the fact that it's scary and down bad.
Yeah, I have not heard of Dean Spade, but I looked him up really briefly, and he looks very, very cool. I put his website in the chat so people can check out his work as well. And seems like he has done a lot of mutual aid work, which definitely that's the big one. That's where, and I think we'll have more opportunities to talk about this later on today. But that's, it has helped me understand I don't put my trust in systems, I put my trust in people, and putting my energy and my love there, I'm going to get it back in spades, unrelated to Dean. Um,
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to move on to our next question. What are you each doing to stay positive? In other words, what is helping you to maintain a healthy mindset during these times? Or what has helped you in the past during the times that you've mentioned?
Yeah, also there's a question in the chat. Is it okay to share thoughts about the discussion? I feel comfortable with that, but I don't
yeah.
know how everybody else. Yeah, definitely. I'd love to know how y'all are feeling and Obviously, we'll have the Q&A at the end, but as things come up too. Um, I think, yeah, I kind of talked about it a little bit, just like building into community. One thing that I have started this year specifically, which is something when I first came out, my big goal was to like make a trans friend. Like I had never met other trans people. I was like, please, like I just want to be in community and I want to be loved and I want to be seen. And I've had such a beautiful time building community. And honestly, like 99% of my network are either trans people, queer people, or dating trans people. So I've done a really good job with that community. And something that I actually started to do this year was build community outside of that. I've joined like, a CrossFit gym. I joined like a dance group, and things that just don't have anything to do with my identity, because I think it is important for us to be able, I'm obviously out and proud there. Like that's not, but it's not the reason we're going there is because of our identities. And I think just being able to be putting that on the shelf for a little while, especially because I work in and do so much trans advocacy, just to put that on the shelf for a little while and focus on being just Mars, I think has been really, really helpful for me to maintain my peace and keep up the joy. And then, yeah, just knowing that this is something I used to say really early on when I did Trans Joy's Resistance, but it really came from a place of like deep, deep rage and anger. Like that's where the resistance is. The piece is like black with these like over aggressive smiles. And it was really about me being like, I'm gonna smile in your face as like a fuck you, because that's like the only thing we can do. And we've been here forever. We're not going anywhere. Even if shit hits the fan politically, like we've built networks before, and we're still gonna be dancing and having fun and building community and culture and fashion and art. And so like that is like a fuck you. Sometimes when I'm so angry and I'm so down bad, that feels like the only way you can take your control back, because I do want to get mad. I do want to get angry, but I can't, I'll burn myself out if I'm just all the time fighting. So how can I like maintain that joy and use it as like a fuck you? I'm gonna cuss a lot in this, I guess.
I think it's a fuck you kind of era. I think we're where we're at. And y'all, if you are not following Mars and looking at his art, it is freaking phenomenal. Please go and like check that guy out, look at his stuff. His art is really, really, really phenomenal. Um, Also, I don't want to cut you off. I want to make sure that you were done answering before
No,
I, okay.
go. I'm done saying fuck. You go.
Okay, beautiful. For now. Yeah, I really echo a lot of what Mars said. I think it's really important to like, for the first probably 5 years of my transition, I was a trans person who happened to be Ben, and now I get to be Ben who happens to be a trans person and have spaces where I'm just playing video games with my friends or board games or just like getting up to some nonsense with my dog. So really echoing everything that Mars said. I think the biggest thing I would add about what I do to stay positive, joy is a big piece of the work that I do. And I spend a lot of time in convincing legislators to care about the bills they're passing. I spend a lot of time at the Capitol or convincing parents to get on board with their kids' new pronouns. And I got really frustrated that it felt like our conversations around why it matters to support trans people begin and end at suicide statistics. And it's all just like, okay, we got these numbers, we got these numbers. What are we running away from? What are we reacting to? What are we afraid of? And I talk about joy, not as a coping mechanism, not as a like, here's how I make myself feel better on a bad day, but as a path, as the way forward, right? When I focus my advocacy on what I am building, on what I am hoping for, specifically and joy, that keeps me going. That sustains me much more than anger possibly could. So I am dreaming of the future very regularly and not doing it using words like no or not. So it is not, I dream of a future that doesn't have this person in office, that doesn't have this policy, because I don't want my future to be limited to what the GOP can imagine and just saying the opposite of that. That's not going to define the shape of my dreams. And so I spend a lot of time really specifically asking myself, what do I want? Not just what am I afraid of? Not just what am I hurt by? What am I angry about? What do I want? And having something I'm fighting for is infinitely more motivating and empowering than having something I'm just afraid of or trying to not be crushed under. I'm fighting the same fight either way, but I fight much more sustainably. And knowing that I get to put that down, knowing that it will not, excuse me, knowing that it will not only be on me to build that world. And the more I get involved in advocacy, the more people I get to understand are moving towards the same world. When I trust that I have somebody by my side who shares my vision, I know that I can take a weekend off because I'm sick, or take a week to go on vacation with my family. And nothing bad will happen because I know I trust other people to keep carrying it forward. We hold each other. The other big thing I'd say about staying positive is you can't move the goalposts. Set goals that you know you can achieve. Right? I think about how Biden put the AIDS memorial quilt on the White House lawn for World AIDS Day a couple weeks ago. People were like, "Man, that was so performative. Why isn't he doing that? We have bigger problems." And I was like, "Hold on, we gotta hit the brakes for a second. If I could take a time machine back in time and talk to the leaders of the ACT UP movement and talk to the people who were fighting the front lines of taking care of this community, the thing they wanted most in the world was just for somebody to care, to look, to pay attention, to acknowledge the hurt we were going through. If I had told them a sitting president would put their quilt, their art, and their pain on the White House lawn on a whole day dedicated to what they were struggling with and acknowledge specifically all of the letters of LGBTQ, call them out by name, say these are people that were hurt the most, they would not believe me. They would be in tears or laughing or just get out of here with that nonsense, right? We never would have imagined we would have gotten to that point 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So we can't keep moving the goalposts. That doesn't mean we can't keep dreaming forward. There will always be a better world we can build, but if your eyes are only ever on the horizon, you will never have something to celebrate. So you got to take those moments and say, like, right, I am so much older than I thought I would ever be. I'm married. I did not think trans people deserved to be loved for a long time as a like lonely trans kid in small town Connecticut. And now I have a wife and a dog. I didn't think I was going to be able to get old enough to have a dog. And so taking moments as often as we can to say, okay, I really want to see, municipal IDs in my city because that will help with gender marker change restrictions. And I know that we got that. We can celebrate this win knowing there's more to go. You got to celebrate the little victories because there is no finish line where you cross the ticker tape and equality is achieved. There will always be more to do. That doesn't mean we're never going to be done. It doesn't mean that we are always losing because we are not winning. We are always winning because we are moving steadily forward. Progress is just going to trend up no matter what we can. So I spend a lot of time trying to stay positive, having my little morning routines, doing my tarot cards, but recognizing that the world trends up and celebrating the little victories as they come is crucial. I know that was like a big soapbox. I'm gonna.
No, beautiful.
Thank you so much for sharing. What strategies in general can you think of that might help folks stay positive during the difficult times that might lie ahead of us?
Mm. I think the biggest thing in particular around the difficult times we are bracing ourselves for is I'm going to acknowledge two things that are both true that are really important. It's going to be awful and it's going to be okay. When I tell you it's going to be awful and I tell you that that is a truth, we all know that, right? We all know it's going to be bad. And when you accept that it's going to be bad, you don't have to go through the 5 stages of grief for every cabinet pick. You don't have to be shocked over every terrible article, right? If we are constantly in a point of being like re-traumatized every time there's an article on CNN, we are going to be miserable all the time. It is so, so important above anything else. Well, I won't say that. It's really important that we all understand that every news platform, every social media app has a financial incentive to make you feel like shit. Not exaggerating here. Directly link the worse you feel money they make. On news apps, every individual negative word in a headline makes you more likely to engage with that article. So, of course, they're going to report this is a disaster, this is catastrophe, the world is ending. On social media apps, when people see posts that make them angry or upset, they are much more likely to comment, to stay on the app, right? When I see a post that makes me happy, I say maybe the world is good. I should call a friend. I should go outside, make a new friend. Who knows what could happen? When I'm afraid, I stay on my phone. Your algorithm is not meant to give you the content you will like the most. Your algorithm is meant to give you the content that will make you stay on the app the most. For every app that you can infinite scroll through, for every news platform that makes their money off of advertising, fear mongering is so prominent. For example, people love to talk about how last year there were 600 anti trans bills proposed across the US. That's a number. People love to talk about the record breaking number of bills. They don't talk about how we defeated 96% of anti trans legislation last year. That's double the proportion we defeated in previous years. That's huge. That is a massive, massive victory. So we have to learn to resist fear mongering, both in just saying, okay, I knew that the next cabinet pick was going to be a piece of shit. I knew that he was going to tweet something terrible on Truth Social today. Stop looking. Know less so that we can do more. So recognize that you don't have to be constantly going through an IV drip of bad news, so that you can actually have energy left over in your day to volunteer, whether it's packing food at a mutual aid group or getting involved in text banking or having conversations with people who are unfamiliar with the trans community, right? There are so many things we can be doing to make a difference. And if we spend our entire energy on staying informed, that doesn't help anybody. Give yourself permission to know less so that you can do more. You don't have to feel like shit all the time. That does not make you morally, doing the right thing because you know how much everybody is suffering. People are suffering. Let's do something about it. So I hope that's helpful. I know those words come off strong. I want to come off as like a benevolent trans older brother, not as a like.
I love everything you're saying, Ben. And coming from, well, this is something that I am in the process of doing actually that I don't share a lot, but I've been working with a researcher. They've been doing all of this research on my social media, specifically about trans joy, because they do data science around like marketing and they've worked with all these big tech companies. And so we're trying to build a framework for what does it mean to through the lens of trans joy, make content on social media that is ethical. And it's been like this 7, 8 month project that we've been working on together. And we're kind of developing out what it looks like in the end. And through doing all of this work, we did find like so many more people were way more motivated to do actual things in their community when they watch things that were about joy. And they were also more likely to spend less time on social media. And the biggest thing that people are doing when they're going to social media is they're lonely. Like that is really what the research showed is they are really lonely. People are really lonely. I can speak to trans men specifically. Our rates of loneliness and things that I won't go into that I think we can all know what I'm talking about are really, really high. And so I think it feels hard right now because a lot of us are from a generation where we've never known anything other than social media. I mean, my number one like career job has been I pay my rent through doing this, and I have for many, many years. So I think it's really difficult to think of a framework outside of that. But I think we, like Ben was saying, need to get to the core of what's going on as a community and the way that we do resource ourselves. And it's through fighting isolation and loneliness. And that will take a little bit more work to build these communities. Like everybody that came here, I just want to give you like a big clap, like a big props. Like I know it seems silly saying it out loud, but I know it. It's a lot of work to like sign up for an email and like put the Zoom link in your calendar. But you are going to feel so much better from doing something like this that's intentional and grounded than spending that hour, which, and I know I've done it, sitting on the toilet, just what's going on, what's going on, what's going on, thinking that that's going to make me feel less lonely because I'm also lonely too. I mean, I think being a trans person, there's a lot of loneliness and there's a lot of isolation. So yeah, putting in that little extra effort of intentional community, and that could be on social media too. Like maybe that's just spending, if your screen time is an hour on Instagram, maybe 30 minutes of that is like a FaceTime call or whatever they call it, like a video call with a friend versus just a scroll. Like it doesn't have to be so black and white, like social media is bad. Because I know when people hear that, they're like, but I've built my only friendships and my only community on here. And that can still continue. But yeah, being really intentional about where we're spending our time and energy because we're not going to have a lot of it. And like Ben saying, we're down bad. We're down bad a little bit. So, or like I said, so we need to be really thoughtful about how we're resourced and how we can come together.
100%. I can't tell you the number of times that I like have just gone on social media being like, well, I feel lonely right now. And then I started to do this thing where every time I was gonna open a social media app, I would say, what am I looking for right now? Is it a laugh? Is it community? Is it meaning? Is it numbness? And do I know that I'm going to get it right now, or am I just rolling a die and hoping I'm going to get it right now? And is there a direct route that does not have social media as my intermediary, right? Can I go directly to somebody's page who I know is hilarious, watch 10 of their videos, then turn off my phone? Can I call a friend? I love that. Mars, that was gas. That was an outstanding answer. That was
I
awesome.
I also want to give credit where credit's due. I'm using a lot of the language from somebody that I love and I look up to a lot. His name is Eli, and he's a gender doula, but he has a course called Resourcing Your Trans Self and Loving Your Trans Self. And that is really the framework that he built of like, we have to resource ourselves, especially as things are going through. How can we resource ourselves as a community? So if you need a gender doula, if you want to look at anything he's done, love him. He's amazing.
That's such a cool job title. I love that. That's sick. I'll put that link in the chat now too. That's
Thank
awesome.
you, Ben.
All right. What guidance do you have for someone who feels like staying positive just isn't working and they just don't feel okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, a lot of my early artwork and the thing that like I got on TikTok, she's back, I guess. Who knows what's going on? But I got on TikTok pretty early and it was in that real phase of my life where I was early on in my transition. I had no friends. I made a video about this on Patreon, which is where I'm trying to move over to. But like, I think a lot of trans masculine people and maybe a lot of trans people in general can relate to. You transition and then you lose a lot of your community. Like my lesbian girlfriend didn't want to be with me, she's a lesbian and I'm a man now, so not gonna work. My like lesbian friend group didn't really feel comfortable anymore. So I feel like I was really down bad and I was really sad and it didn't feel like staying positive was possible. And that's when the is resistance of the trans joy piece really means a lot to me, where it's like that rage that my therapist calls it, that mobilizing energy doesn't necessarily have to be bad. That like mobilizing sorrow sometimes for me doesn't have to be bad, but how can we think about utilizing it in ways? And like Ben was saying, how can we like sit with the truth of the pain as opposed to trying to run away and then use that energy? I mean, there's so, for me at least, when this is happening, I'm just like, what am I going to do? And what am I thinking? And how can I turn that into something good? And that was, I look back at that early work that I did in 2020 when I was so fucking mad. I mean, I would journal every morning, like, I hate everything. I hate everybody I lost, everything I've ever wanted. I'm never going to have a girlfriend again. That is some of the best artwork I've ever made. I look back at that and I'm like, fuck, I wish I could make a piece like that again because those pieces just were so full of energy. And so what was the, I forgot what the question was, but that's what I had to say.
Thank you. The question was, what guidance do you have for someone who feels that staying positive just isn't working and they just don't feel okay?
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes it's okay to do that and then just make some crazy shit. It might be your best art. That's what I, small, succinct.
Yeah, channel
I
I
Yeah,
love
listen,
that.
okay is not the goal. Shit's messed up right now. It's okay to feel bad right now and staying positive. There's this expression, something called toxic positivity, which is really not what we want to do right now. Toxic positivity says, stop being sad. Everything is okay. Manifest joy. Choose happiness. Do a juice cleanse. Don't look at your phone ever again. Other people are going to suffer, not you, and it's all going to be fine. Believe in yourself. Girl boss. That's not that's not what we're up to right now. There's bad stuff happening, and it's okay to want to say, hey, I don't want to think about this right now. And there's a difference between just saying, my head is in the sand and that makes me really happy, and saying, I need to look away for a minute, right? We gotta have boundaries. We have to be intentional about where we set those boundaries. So, okay is not always gonna be the goal. I really think of joy as much more of an active verb than it is of an emotional state, to be honest. Joy is choices that we make of how we want to live our lives. So you get to decide what you want to do, but saying, well, why don't I feel joyful? There's this saying that I really like in a song that's called Good Morning Sunshine by the, oh, I think it's the Narcissist Cookbook. And one of the lines in the song is every morning we get up and we make our bed and we brush our teeth and get ready. And we do this and we make food and clean our rooms, even though it's going to get dirty again. And we do all these things, not because it's guaranteed to make us feel better, but because failing to do so is guaranteed to make us feel worse. So take care of your human body, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs: eat. Most adults are vitamin D deficient. Symptoms of vitamin D deficiency include fatigue, depression, and lower back pain, which every queer person I know is complaining of. Sometimes it's not the world, sometimes it's that you need to go outside or take a vitamin D supplement because there's not a lot of sun right now. So take care of your human like you are a little plant, like you are your own pet. Feed your meat body. And what I'd also say, if I could get back that thought that has fled the premises completely and utterly, let's see, don't do toxic positivity. Take care of your human body. Nope, it's gone. It'll come back to me eventually. There was some really nugget of wisdom. I'll get it back. Take care of your human body. That's going to be crucial.
Hopefully you'll get it back maybe after I'm done. But yeah. Um
Yeah, I feel like it's a little too late for me to change the name of the event from saying positive to teetering somewhere near positivity. But obviously, I'm one of the people who needs to hear what you both are sharing, because and this has really impacted me, because I obviously I named this because I thought I needed to stay positive, and it's just been so hard to do that. So I really appreciate your thoughts on this, and I definitely echo a lot of what you're saying because I know some people who, kind of put up boundaries and didn't want to talk to me because like talking to me meant having to admit that like I wasn't okay and everyone's not okay all the time and and life is really nice for them as like a nice, middle class, if not rich, like white cis person, it was who did not want to know that the world is not okay for everyone, that things are not going great for everybody. So anyway, I really echo a lot of what you're saying, and thank you for this. I'm going to move on to our next question, uh, what is, which is, what strategies or advice do you have for processing fear, anxiety, and other difficult emotions?
I
yeah.
think,
Oh,
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mars.
oh no, okay. Um no, I started last time though. I messed it up. It's you now.
Oh, right. We're at odd number. Okay, great. Slay. Um, biggest one, go to therapy. Everybody should be in therapy. Therapy's awesome. Find a therapist who gets you. If you're thinking, but I went to therapy and it was bad, that means you had a bad therapist. There are other styles of therapy. Not every therapist takes the same approach, and there are like really major differences in schools of thought. And people used to say, well, you would go to the doctor if your arm was broken, so you should go to the therapist if your brain is broken, is how that logic seems to go. And like, okay, yeah, sure. And I go to therapy for the same reason I go to the gym. I would like to get stronger. I'm not going to the gym because my muscles are broken. I'd like to build up skills. So then, when a cute old lady asks me to get down a 50-pound bag of cat food at the pet store, I can feel all good about myself and get that down without throwing out my back. Right? I want to build muscles to build a body that feels stronger. I have lots of my own reasons for wanting to build muscles. Go to therapy to build these muscles. I promise you're going to need them. We know, right? We know it's going to be challenging, not just because of politics, because it's hard to be a person in general. Go to therapy so you can have a space to talk about that. Now, sometimes therapy isn't an option, whether it is because you're really uncomfortable or you can't afford it or it doesn't work in your schedule or whatever it is. That's okay too. There's a really wonderful book I recommend too. One called Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? And it's essentially like all the strategies a therapist will talk to you about, that if you don't go to therapy, you're not going to be learning these things. So, why has nobody told me this before? And a book called How to Keep House While Drowning, which is just, hey, you are a person who's really struggling and you've got a house that you need to clean or mouths you need to feed or laundry that you need to do. How can you balance these things and take care of your little, human pet? Um, so give yourself that space. One of the big things I really like to do, I'm big into tarot. Not in a like, I think my tarot cards can tell the future, but in a like, give me an opportunity to reflect. So questions I really like to ask my tarot deck include, what does it look like to find peace today? How much, how can I balance work and relaxation today? How can I let go of anger at this person in my life? And the cards just give me prompts, new perspectives, new lenses with which to think about the things that I'm going through. So having some kind of meditative or mindfulness has such a like corporate tinge to it now, but like having an opportunity that you give yourself to just sit down, feel your feelings, think about it, talk to a trusted friend, journal about it, talk to your pet about it because they're not going to judge you, or hopefully they're not going to respond. If they respond, I would maybe call somebody. But whether it's the news or like 911, whatever you got to do. So don't try to go through that alone. Recognize that those emotions are here to protect you. Anxiety for me is a big one. I've struggled a lot with anxiety in a way that is very like I have a diagnosed anxiety disorder and I'm often afraid of things that should not be that scary. So I like to thank my anxiety. My anxiety started when a small trans kid, always worried about whether I was going to be safe, how people were going to react. And so I thank my anxiety for protecting me. I say, thank you for letting me know that this could be a dangerous situation. I think I feel ready to send this email or to make this phone call. Thank you for trying to keep me safe. I appreciate that. And then things like anger, I tend to be slow to anger, quick to forgive. And there's an expression I really like, which is anger is a sword that you hold by the blade. So when I am processing big emotions like that, I am often looking for ways I can put that sword down because it will always hurt me more than it will hurt the person I'm angry at. So I try to look for what unmet need my emotions are indicating to me and how can I find a way to meet that need. And therapy is something that gave me a lot of these skills to be able to address my emotions in that way.
Yeah, I mean, you said so much that I was gonna say too. I love therapy major. I've recently started EMDR, which is a new form of therapy for me. It's amazing. I want to echo something in the chat too. I have anxiety as well, and figured out I had ADHD, and thinking about ways to kind of make my life work around me as opposed to trying to fit in so much into a system that was really never built for any person, let alone somebody that is neurodivergent. Um, I think another thing too, I know that therapy is not always accessible, like Ben was saying. So there's a lot of other resources I want to shout out, like for trans men, Camp Lost Boys has free virtual programming now. There's, support groups for a lot of local LGBT centers, and a lot of things are virtual now. So maybe you don't have a support group for your LGBT center, but you could attend the Zoom for one in Los Angeles. We have a lot of stuff at the LA LGBT Center. There's 12-step programs that have always been free. There are a lot of networks and support groups that you can go to that are accessible that don't cost money, because I know that that was honestly one of the biggest factors for me is I was like, I'm not going to invest this money in myself. And then once I went a couple of times, I realized it was worth it and I needed to prioritize it. And maybe, you'll have that journey, or maybe it's just not something that you can have right now. But yeah, definitely reaching out for help. Also, like, because I'm a big part of Camp Lost Boys and I'm speaking to my own experience, trans men do not reach out to each other. I'm sure a lot of people do not reach out to each other, but trans men specifically, we're in this weird intersection of being like men who don't reach out to each other at all and then being isolated as trans people. So, speaking from my own experience, but I think this can relate to everybody, like reach out to people and tell them about how you're feeling. Like, don't be ashamed or embarrassed that you are feeling anxious. And like you were saying too, if somebody can't hold space for that, that's okay. Try again. If I'm crying, I will call 5 friends. And I'm not embarrassed. I'm not ashamed that I'll call them the next day if they don't answer. Like, I don't care. And I have friends that know, and then they're not going to judge me for that. And friends that'll do the same thing for me. And sometimes I can't answer that FaceTime call. And then sometimes I'm like, let's talk for 4 hours. So, yeah, making sure that you're open and accessible to queer and trans people right now, because they might need to hear from you just as much as you need to hear from them.
Yeah, I love that, Mars. And I do think that people are so hesitant to reach out to somebody to say, like, hey, I need help right now. And like, think about how it feels when a friend reaches out to you and you get to do a favor for somebody, right? That, like, to put it very frankly, like, it makes us feel really good about ourselves when we get to help a friend. It makes us feel happy and warm. Like, wow, look, I took somebody to the airport. I got like, oh, like, pat on the back. I got to be a good friend. This is nice. It's a gift. to ask somebody for help, to be vulnerable, to give them an opportunity to show up for you. And it lets them know that they can ask you for help. If you never ask for help, why would somebody assume that that's something you're okay with? So it really gives people the gift of your trust and your vulnerability. And if they don't have space to hold it right now, that's okay. Doesn't make it any less valuable. It just means that their arms are full right now. Doesn't make it any less of a gift.
So well said. Thank you so much. Our next question is, can you give us examples of what, well, first off, maybe define for us what a support network is, and then also if you could give us some examples of what that looks like and why it's important.
Yeah, I mean, I've brought them up a lot, but I feel like a support network for me has definitely been Chaos Boys. I've met a handful of the people on this panel and knew about it because of the networking that happened at Camp Lost Boys. Um, but a network doesn't have to be like a big thing that, somebody put on that's a camp. It could be much smaller than that. It could be, just your small friend group. It could be virtual, maybe people FTM Reddit when I first came out was a support network for me in a lot of ways, and that was the only place I could connect with people. And some support networks that I have, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I feel so grateful and I'm very privileged that I have a lot of access to queer and trans support networks and FTM Reddit is a fossil. I know I'm aging myself. But yeah, having support networks where I'm not only there because I'm trans. Like maybe we could all be trans and like to play basketball together, or maybe it's just a basketball group and I'm the only trans person. Or maybe the coolest thing I would think about some of the things that I've been doing, I like joined CrossFit, like I said, and the dance thing. Like, I'm pretty sure that one of the other guys in the CrossFit gym is trans, but I don't know. I mean, I'm just assuming, or maybe he's sure, and we don't need to talk about it, like it doesn't, but we're there. And yes, there is community in that way, but that's not why we're there, and maybe one day we'll joke around about testosterone, or maybe he'll think that I'm crazy and be like, I'm a cis man. But I think like support networks that don't always have to do with the hardships or, advocacy or activism or, fighting the fight. That's really important. And I'm, especially as queer and trans people, I know that we're probably already doing it. You're probably already doing that work and you probably have been doing that work for a long time. I mean, that's just part of our life. So finding networks that you can just let loose.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I'll also add is when I think about looking for resources and building a network, when I started, I came out, like I said, I was a kid living in small town Connecticut, and our town was really small, and so there weren't a lot of other out trans and queer students. And so the way that we found each other in all the towns, Connecticut is a state of small towns. It's just the suburb of New York, the entire thing, except for the part that's a suburb of Boston. So there was a Facebook group for queer high school students for the entire state of Connecticut. I spent a year as the president of that group. There was like 450 kids, and that was our support network. And I took that energy with me when I moved to St. Louis and started becoming more of an active community organizer and started to take the approach of when you're looking for resources and when you're building like mutual aid, which when we say mutual aid, it just means helping each other. People like to use like very big ideological language on social media and very like, ooh, look at me. I'm very social justice language. Like mutual aid means helping each other. It means that I will help you. I will watch your cat. It means my organization will help you rebuild your home after a fire, will help you get more clothes. It just means we lift each other up, sometimes in unconventional ways. Mutual aid networks often started with things like tool libraries, neighborhoods saying, hey, does anybody need a power saw? Because houses on this street. We do not need 14 power saws. We need one power saw and a Google sheet. So mutual aid, it just means helping each other in an interesting way. And I'm still learning more about mutual aid. So there are lots of amazing books about getting more and more deeply involved in it. But when we're looking for resources and building our networks, I highly recommend taking a bullseye approach, finding community as locally as possible and finding resources as locally as possible, and then expanding. So, as an example of mental health and advocacy resources, if I'm having a mental health crisis, here in St. Louis, we've got an organization called the St. Louis Queer Support Helpline. They've recently changed their name to Queer Support and Healing. They're called Squish. And so I know I can call them, and I know They know exactly what local news article I'm freaking out about. They know exactly who to call, what resources are available, right? Their budget is smaller, but their net they're trying to cover is smaller. I am their exact target audience. So they're prepared to support me. Then I can go up to my municipality or metropolitan area level resources, right? Let's say I'm in a suburb of St. Louis. I know I can reach out in the broader radius. Then I can reach out to my state level resources and finally my national level resources. Trevor Project is an amazing resource. They have a massive net they need to cover. So finding more local mental health community and resources, as much as we can put that energy in locally, that's where you will see the biggest returns on impact in your life. Now, online is a different story, right? It's amazing to have and build online community. I have had lots of wonderful friends and still do that I have met via social media and online. But putting our energy where we can into building these local communities means that we feel less isolated, that we run into people we know. So we're more excited to leave our houses and we're shopping at local businesses. And so then we have local businesses paying local taxes. And so our roads are getting fixed up, right? It's keeping things local and getting more involved in our communities in the center of that bullseye. We are going to see the biggest impacts of putting in our support network. Also, want to give a big old plug to PFLAG. If any of you haven't heard of them, used to stand for Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. It is not an acronym anymore because it is significant amounts of trans people and parents and families of trans people. I have gotten really involved with PFLAG a couple years ago. I decided I wanted to do a free event for every PFLAG chapter in the country. I am 110 presentations in, and I gotta say, every single one of those chapters has like adopted me. I love all these people, and they're so diverse, right? There are some chapters that are all grandparents, some that are mostly trans people coming to hang out, some that have multiple meetings for allies and members of the community. Getting involved in these communities and finding a support group of, if your parents have cut you off, find a parent who is an empty nester whose kid is gay and going to college somewhere else and they just want to give love to somebody locally. Like, look for people who want to help. There are good people all around us. Yeah, PFLAG Fresno, that's how I got introduced to you all. Finding the people around us who are doing good work in our bullseye want to give so much love to you specifically. So finding those groups is so crucial.
So true. I did a PFLAG presentation once. I love it. I love seeing all the parents, the moms, the grandmas. So
It's
sweet.
so wholesome.
All right. What are some ways we can expand our support network? I guess you may have already answered this, but if you have any other thoughts on this question, what are some ways that we can expand our support network if we don't feel like we have very much of one, or if we feel like we don't want to risk overwhelming the same small group of people with all of our needs?
Yeah, I feel like I kind of already touched on that one. Unless Ben, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think honestly your answer was really perfect. Join a bunch of different groups, spread yourself out, find lots of people to hang out with. I think we really kind of nailed that one.
The one thing actually I will say now that you said that, is don't be afraid of putting yourself out there or like messing up. I feel like a lot of the times people don't want to join a new thing. And I know also I want to be like cognizant of intersectionality. Like there's a next level for us, like going to a random place, like you don't know if it's going to be like safe or stuff like that. So I do want to acknowledge that. Use your best judgment. But don't be afraid of like looking stupid. Like I was a horrible dancer, and I went to a dance class. I was like the worst one and I'm doing better, and people are bad, worse than me now and looking at me and like, oh, how do I do this? Or maybe you'll hate it, maybe you'll do a dance class and you'll hate it and then you'll find something else. Just like get back on that horse. I think that's the major thing of like trans joy, trans hope in the not toxic way is like even when down bad, like you got to get back up and try something different. Okay, it didn't work, move on. What's next? What are we doing?
Mm. Yeah, I tried to make friends at a queer recreational softball team. The problem is that every other team was of like baseball dads who were really excited to blow off some steam, and my team was somebody posted in the local queer Facebook group, who wants to join my softball team? And I was like, oh, well, I'm not that good at softball, but I'll be there to hang out and I'll kind of let the team carry me. That's fine. But every single person was just there to hang out and let the team carry them. And so the referees stopped coming to our games because we were losing by 30. The baseball dads putting people on our teams. That did not work out. It's okay. I got back on the horse. I found a different thing to get involved with. It's okay to fail. And it's funny when we fail sometimes.
That's funny.
I love that. What are some ways that we, nope, that's the same question. Okay, so what are some further suggestions you might recommend for someone who is still really struggling, but like may need something more urgent or even feels like they're having a mental health emergency? What resources can you suggest?
Do you want to start, Ben?
Sure, yeah. Okay, so it depends on how immediately urgent it is. First things first, we want to let our if we have people in our support work network, friends, loved ones, like let them know, hey, I am in it right now. I am gonna need some support and ask for what you need. So I need somebody to take me to this place. I need somebody to come and help me clean my house because I can't see my sink because it's full of dishes, right? Ask for what you need if you have the ability to do that. If we are trying to find a safe additional resource for mental health crisis, right, that bullseye approach is going to be critical. Trevor Project, they're amazing. They do not know exactly what the resources are in Central California, in Middle Tennessee. So find as local as you can get. Hey, here's what I'm struggling with, because they might say, okay, great. I had a friend go through this 2 months ago. This inpatient facility was really gender affirming. Question in the chat about P flag. Oh, we'll come back to that later. Short answer, yes. But reaching out to a local P flag chapter, to the doctor that does your hormones if you're on hormones, to your LGBT community center, anybody who is as local as you can get, go one ring out at a time and say, I'm really struggling. Who should I call? Who do you know? Almost every one of these organizations is going to have some kind of resource directory of who do we trust, who do we know is a good resource, or they'll know who to call who does have that, right? That's a support network. It's a web, right? If I jump and I fall into a safety net and the net is one piece of string, that's doing nothing. A net is all just a whole bunch of strings, but because they're interconnected, they can catch us. So finding those people locally and saying, hey, I need help right now. What are my options? It's going to be really crucial. And then Trevor Project can be an outstanding resource. If that's your only option, they're an amazing resource. They've got lots of resources, dedicated volunteers. So looking local, but expanding as much as we can is going to be important. It's okay to need more help. It's happened to all of us, or a lot of us. Hopefully, it doesn't happen to all of us all the time, but recognize that it has happened to a lot of us. You will be okay. This will pass.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Ben, too, and I feel like it goes through a through line that we've kind of been talking about of like social media and in-person communities and communities. I feel like this conversation of like immediate need, people will often go to social media. Because I was thinking like, what did I do when I was like immediate need? And it was FTM Reddit, it was like Chase Ross's YouTube video. I was like, I need to get through the next hour of my life. Like, let's just be realistic. Like that's how it felt. Like I need to get through the next 30 minutes so that I can like have my friend come over, or so that like, my mom will come home, like whatever it was. And I feel like that concept of resourcing too really plays into this, of like sometimes you're not resourced enough to do anything other than pick up the phone and like just watch a funny video. Like sometimes you're not resourced enough to sign up for the email and get on the Zoom call. And I think that is really like important to hold space for. And then thinking about how do we level up once we do have those resources? Like how do we start pushing ourselves to do that little bit more when we have that little bit more resource? How do we, okay, yes, we've gotten through the next hour. And sometimes it's really like that. Like I've gotten through the next 5 minutes of the day and I survived that 5 minutes. And then maybe tomorrow I can do something slightly more. Like maybe I can look for an Instagram of a local org. But also, if you need to spend, there was, I think, a month of my life when I first came out where I did not want to leave the house. I could not leave the house. All I did all day was watch YouTube videos and like barely make it through. And like that is okay. If that is what you need to do, that's okay. And I'm grateful that I took that time for myself. And then also, I'm grateful that I got back on the horse whenever I could, whenever I was ready, and just did that little one day at a time, tiny little step.
Beautiful. Very good answer.
Oh, I am unmuted. Okay. Are there any final thoughts you would like to share with us before we open up for live Q&A from the audience?
No, I think I'm excited to hear what questions people have. We've got a lot of good stuff in the chat.
Yeah, we've already got some questions that I was saving for this Q&A. Before I get started, I just want to say, please remember to be mindful of others and to be thoughtful in the questions that you ask and how you phrase them. And to ask a question, you can just put your question in the chat and I will voice it for you. If you want to remain anonymous and not have everyone see that you're the one who asked it, make sure you change the to area in the chat box from the word everyone to my name, which is Arian Reed. And it starts with an A, so it should hopefully show up at the top of the list of people that you can message directly. Um, if I'm going to scroll up and because
I
I can't
see a
figure out how to
great
make this
question
chat
that
box.
is there's a great question I would love to start with if you're okay with me picking one because it's one of my favorite questions to answer.
Yes, please.
Okay, so Elisa asked, in the spirit of allyship, how do you try to help others if it means dealing with a prejudiced idiot and you're trying not to lose your cool? This is a great question because I'm a public speaker. I'm answering questions all the time, including questions that are really, I'm going to say original, and that's going to be a really nice way to put that. Sometimes people can come up with a brand new order of words in the English language that has not been done before. So I do a couple of things to try to get through to those people. The biggest thing I do is I envision that allyship is a party I'm hosting at my house. The day I came out, I invited everybody in my life to come to my allyship party. Some people were already there early decorating, they knew it was coming. Other people said, great, this is a surprise, but I'll be there right away. And it's 2 hours in, and Uncle Steve was supposed to bring the salsa, and we're all still eating dry chips, right? Everybody has noticed Uncle Steve did not show up. Uncle Steve's a real person for me. He is my real uncle. He is in QAnon. He had a really hard time when I came out. And so when somebody's late to our allyship party, they call us up and they say, hey, sorry I'm late. I'm lost. And we say, God, of course you're lost. You're such a bigot. Just turn left. And we hang up the phone. That does two things. Number one, why on earth does he want to come to my party if he knows that no matter what time he arrives, it is too late and everyone is mad at him? We have to let go of this idea that, people who are not already at the party are doing it because they are bad, horrible people who hate you. Misinformation is a multi-billion-dollar industry that doesn't only work on bad people or stupid people. Even if the best day was yesterday, the second best day is today. So only go into that conversation if you know you have the ability to put that anger down. If you're still holding on to that anger, that's okay. Anger is an important emotion, and it is not the most helpful tool for getting somebody to our party. The other thing, when he says, I'm lost, and I say, turn left, you'll notice I did not ask, where are you? That's the least helpful directional advice I could possibly give. We have a lot of assumptions about why people don't want to use our pronouns, why they struggle to support queer family members, why they believe in things about trans people in sports, right? And we jump to these conclusions and we throw our canned conversational spaghetti at the wall and hope that something's going to stick, and we just leave feeling worse. I can't get you where I want to go until I know where you're lost. So I treat myself as an anthropologist. I sit and I just ask questions, not because I want to have my mind changed, but because I'm genuinely curious about where they're coming from. And you will find very quickly a lot of big, complicated emotions because the person sitting in front of us is an entire human with a lot of usually trauma that is not the word that they are going to use, a lot of their own baggage and fears and biases, right? A lot of times it's if I admit you're trans, I have to admit my kid is trans. How come I had to put myself in a box that didn't fit for years and an 11-year-old gets to tell me they're opting out? That's embarrassing. If I struffered, you should too. Asking questions so we can figure out where someone is stuck will be infinitely more helpful in building trust and getting them where we want them to go. The other thing I do as a way to take care of myself in a mental health practice, because yes, it's really effective when we're able to be so patient, and God, is that exhausting sometimes. So I have, and very few people have seen this whole thing, and I don't tell people in general spaces about this, but in trans and queer and ally spaces that are really safe, I have a PowerPoint document of all the unhinged questions people have ever asked me. Again, I don't really show it to anybody because I don't want to embarrass anyone, but all of a sudden somebody comes up to me and they're saying something that is just unbelievably inappropriate. I'm not upset. This is content. I have a new slide. I can put this on, right? I have a world record question. I have the pronouns section. I have all sorts of funny stuff that it turns it from a really frustrating conversation into a tight five. And that just makes it makes it more tolerable for me. It makes it okay in those settings. So you got to find what helps you keep your cool when you go into those conversations of truly inviting somebody to the allyship house. And again, not every conversation has to be about getting through to somebody, but if your goal is getting through to somebody, patience has got to be a tool in your toolkit.
It's amazing. I really relate. I think just briefly, and again, I talk about trans men because it's my own experience, but I think a lot of this can relate to people. But something that I'm thinking about a lot is how do men come together and give each other like a framework? Like, I don't think there's examples of healthy masculinity. And I see that also with allyship is if you have the capacity, which we don't always, um, to, yeah, invite a broader conversation because I think we've come to a place where we're really yelling at each other a lot because of social media. And just to be like so realistic, every time you're doing that, you're getting a little high. Like these companies like are really like embedded in getting our dopamine receptors up through whatever means necessary. And a lot of the time that's rage. And you're not going to feel great when you crash from a high. So even if it feels like, why should I give you any of my extra time? Like you're literally horrible, like you're being a dick, like I don't want to do any extra labor. Just being so selfish, just being so realistic and so selfish. You're gonna probably feel better if you don't engage in like the hate and the vitriol, like just silence and step away, or maybe trying to understand if you can. But yeah, that's just made me think of that, your answer.
Yes. A productive conversation will never happen in a comment section. Delete the comment, take a step back. It might happen in a private conversation, but if the person is not willing or safe to have that conversation privately, it means that that conversation was meant for points, not for dialogue. They're just there to upset you. And something else that I want to add also is I think this fits really nicely into the framework that I had brought up earlier around that we need to have something we're dreaming of in a world we are trying to build, right? Lots of us love to really theoretically say, I want to live in a world that is kinder and gentler and offers forgiveness to each other. And we view that as very selectively for within the people who are already in this movement, working towards that better world. We say, I want to live in a world that's kinder, but we are not acting like it. If I want to live in a world that gives people the room to grow, that gives people the room to be wrong and fail and make changes, I have to start acting like that. So being kind, even though we are in the age of you don't owe anybody anything and Google is free, Google is hard to use. Google is broken. I don't know if you've noticed, but if you Google what is non-binary, you're going to get 19 slightly different answers. For a, 50-year-old cishet white guy living in Nebraska, if he Googles what is non-binary, the answer is going to be, I don't know either, dude. Good luck. Sometimes if we want to I'm always when I have these reactions, I want to yell at somebody, I want to do this thing. I have to ask myself, is this the world that I want to be living in? Or am I assuming that somebody else is going to build it and then I get to step into it? I want to live my life as if I'm already in the world that I want to build, and my world will align with that. I find that people are kinder when I treat them with kindness, and we don't owe anybody anything is just American rugged individualism wearing a therapy hat. We owe each other everything. We are all just walking each other home. We are all just people doing our best out here, giving each other the grace that we have learned to jump to not doing because of like gotcha, social media, whatever. Like, it's not, it doesn't bring us any closer to the kind, gentle world that I know so many of us are hungry for. It's not going to appear as a door you get to walk through. You have to choose to start living that way.
Yeah. I wanted to answer this question, Cam, because I feel like I can very much relate. Um, Specifically to succinct it for everybody, how do you create content without putting yourself at risk or like not lose out on opportunities that might be, putting yourself out there for like a brand deal and stuff. So, for anybody that might be, which we probably all are, we get tokenized often and you don't want to like, I've done it. I'm not gonna miss out on paying my rent because it's a soft tokenization or whatever it is. So I've been doing all this research on social media and how to be ethical and trans joy. And then I also consult other people on their social media of how to do these things in a more ethical way. And something that me and a couple of trans people have really been trying to craft is this intersection of how do I make content that is profitable, that's marketable, that's viral light, but it has some barrier where it's not gonna be transphobic target. Like, and I think Ben started off in the very beginning. I loved what you said about this, and I do it a lot in my work, like not using that like fuck you or like get away from me language, but like something, an example of how I've done this. One of my most popular shirts recently was trans kids deserve to grow up. And like leading in that like kind of framework, like it's not that a transphobe couldn't argue with that, but it's not really for them. You know, like I'm gonna make videos like that are at some point even not understandable by people that could hurt me, but are so important and necessary for like the queer and trans community. I think another one that went really popular was like somebody making a joke about me being like a trans mass bottom, which was fun and everybody loved it. But I don't think a transphobe is going to know what the fuck that means. But y'all know what the fuck that means, and we can kind of have that. So how are we building content and like navigating things in a way where it's not like viral clickbait? And but can still, you know, like so much of the I'm thinking a lot about this because TikTok's gone. So much of us are a part of the creator economy. So much of us do run small business on social media. So much DEI consulting. So many people have made so much important livelihoods on these apps, and we're gonna have to stay on them regardless of how Meta wants to treat us. So yeah, how do we be strategic and like I'm so excited too to see how other people do it and how I work with other people to think about marketing in this new way, in this positive way, and not using another thing too that I think is difficult is I think we've gone so far where everything was about education for so long, and I did it too. It was all about, can we just educate people to tell them that I'm just like you and it's okay. And now people have so much information about us that I'm like, you know more about trans guys than anybody did on FTM Reddit, like back in the day. So how do we, I personally, I'm kind of moving away from that. I'm like, that's not really my vibe. My vibe is to create something for myself. So when you specifically are taking this brand deal, when you're going out there and you're thinking about this content, how are you filming things where you're talking to me? How are you filming things where you're talking to Ben? You know, like you're talking to us, things that I will understand, not trying to make this whole thing for everybody else. I don't need a million views. I don't need every cis person and their mom to have some idea. I don't need to make some big claim, you know, like all the time. And if you want to do that, that's great too. But for my safety, I found that that is a much better approach. And I think it's going to be better for creating these smaller communities, even in social media.
Absolutely. Hell yeah to 100% of that. Not everybody should have to be the educator. I want to be that so that you don't have to, so that you can make cool ass fucking art content and out there queer in the woods content. Yes, you gotta find a brand that feels good to you and not like, can I fix the world with this brand? The world is hard and scary. Figure out what little things you might be able to do, but you gotta do it in a way that feels good. The one thing I'll add from a really like very tactical safety standpoint is post a video in a place once you have left that place. You will notice I post a ton on social media. I post a lot of stuff in my apartment. You will not see a single post that has any identifiable details of my apartment. You will see a story for me that says, love working from this coffee shop, posted at 9 p.m. because I'm not posting, hey, everybody, here's my address right now. I'm not telling people where I am at any given moment in time, and I'm not giving them the tools to find me or the people that I love. You will never catch a license plate in those pictures. I will often put emojis over my friends' faces if it's a like picture that I know they did not consent to being on. And like, I don't get a ton of hate. I don't have a massive platform. On TikTok, I had a bigger following. But even so, I am just out of an abundance of caution doing, you know, those things to make sure that I'm not making it easy for somebody to be shitty towards me. The other thing I'll say is resist the urge to rage bait. I had a minute where I was in my influencer era a couple years ago. I was really into TikTok, posting, I'm your trans older brother. And I was trying to do all this like cool educational content for the trans community around, you know, what's bioessentialism and how can we be more inclusive? And it was doing okay, not great. And then I made a video. I was feeling really angry about J.K. Rowling. So I made a video that was like, hey, still supporting Harry Potter monetarily is an act of hostility towards your trans friends. Posted that through the roof. The views are huge. The money coming in was not huge. It was like $100. I was not like, lining my pockets, but it was going fairly viral. Problem was people were eating each other alive in the comments. They were hurting each other. I made a second video to try to quell some of that, to try to say, here are the big things you all are debating. Let me sum that up. That one went even bigger. People are being even worse to each other in the comments. Those were my most profitable videos. Even with like another year and a half of making content, those are the videos that made the most money. And it was not worth it because you look through those comments, it was just people getting hurt. It was just people putting themselves out there to fight with transphobes. And even though I knew, hey, I'm not engaging, I got to protect myself, my whole platform was mostly followed by, like, for me, my platform was for queer kids who were feeling afraid and needed some validation. And I was setting them up to T-ball themselves for transphobes to come in and say cruel stuff because they were just in the mood to troll. That felt terrible. So it might feel like my platform will do the best if I rage bait, and that's technically true. You will see more views if you rage bait, and you can do so carefully, right? I have another friend who's a trans femme fashion creator, and so she says whenever I do rage, I will donate half of the amount to my local trans support organization. I will delete hateful comments, even though those threads are going to be great for engagement. Like, nope, do not want any of that happening here. Often she'll disable the comments so that people can't be cruel to each other there. So you can decide, right? If you want to make money off people being cruel, okay, that's reasonable to say, like, you're going to throw hate at me. Fine, I'm going to buy myself a brand new, really nice outdoor backpack and tent based on your bigotry, whatever. So you get to find a way to find the balance that works for you. I know for me, like I knew what my platform was specifically, and so my audience, I didn't want to put them into that. Your audience is maybe going to be less kids, so that could be different. But finding those lines, and again, do not post your location live ever, are going to be great for our safety.
And one last final thing too. I also have, and I have been on the internet for so long. I've had a lot of followers. I've had a lot of million views. I have really not dealt with a lot of hate comments. And I think one of the big things is that I have my Instagram comments, so you have to follow me to comment. So
Mm,
haters like don't want to go through that step. I haven't done that on TikTok. And then wait, there was one other
that's
thing.
so
Oh,
smart.
yeah. And then the other thing too is like we were talking about small communities. I was doing like all this trans stuff, and then I released one of my most prized collection. Like it was something I was so proud of. And it reminds me again of what you were saying about Ben earlier about the goalposts and really recognizing like the good things in the moment. Those videos tanked, tanked. They are some of my worst performing videos, and I went through a whole mental moment about it. I was like, this is horrible. But then I really had to sit with the fact that the views aren't worth it necessarily. Putting yourself out there in an authentic way isn't worth it. And then also just again, strategically from somebody that's in the field of social media, I've done this work for a long time. Views don't matter anymore. People don't care about views, they don't care about followers. They're so inflated, they're fake, they're full of bots. It's not worth it. Building real authentic connection, having one or two real threads in your comment are so much better than 100 comments, even for profitability. Even if you're talking to a brand that has tons of money, they want to see that your engagement is high, view counts and all of it doesn't matter. So even doing the rage bait thing, there's no money too. There's no money in getting a bunch of views anymore. You can have 5 million views on TikTok, there's no money. 5 million views on Instagram, there's no money. So I'm telling you, even so factually, it's not worth it.
Thank you, both of you. I want to make sure we go back to a question that someone asked a little while ago. And I mean, granted, this question could be answered in like a whole nother panel discussion, but someone asked, how can you navigate being your authentic self in the next 4 years instead of trying to hide and fit into gender norms?
Mm,
Yeah. I can start, Ben.
yeah, good.
I've talked again with my dear friend Eli, the gender doula. Obviously, he impacts me a lot. He's a genius. And I spent a lot of time trying to be palatable. I spent a lot of time in my early social media, like trying to be palatable, trying to be like the cute, if they can just see that I'm just like everybody else, like it's gonna work. And again, I'm coming from a big place of privilege and a big place of safety, but it didn't work. It's never gonna work. It never worked for me. I'll never be cishet enough. I'll never be, whatever enough to do all of that. And so even if you can't be 100% authentic, like realistically in the outside world, like for safety or whatever else it is, I think right now is about going internal. I really think the next 4 years is about going internal and finding that like inner queerness, like queerness at its core, like weird, like different, like out there, like strange. Like it's never gonna work to cut off parts of yourself to try and fit in. And it doesn't matter how much we bootlick, like the people, the richest trans people that are closest as they can to cis people and cis things, if medical coverage, I mean, hate to say it, if medical coverage gets cut, it's cut for everybody. It doesn't matter how much you fit in. It doesn't matter. It's not going to work. Again, I feel like at this point, I'm being like so logical and realistic about things. Like, so even if you have to do what you have to do to be safe, I don't want to take that away. Do whatever you have to do to go out in the world and be safe. But trying to fit in or be less queer or be less authentic, it's just not going to feel good, and it's not going to really even get you that much safer in your core at the end of the day. So however you can find moments to be authentic in a safe way to yourself and lean into your queerness, lean into your weirdness, like that is what built so much fashion, so much art, voguing, like a ballroom, like all these beautiful things came from us being weird as fuck. So keep doing it.
Yeah. Hell yeah, completely agree. And somebody mentioned a word in the chat that I really want to highlight, which is respectability politics. Respectability politics is essentially the idea that within marginalized groups, there's somebody who looks at somebody who's like 5 to 10% weirder than they are and say, you are the reason I don't have my rights. Stop doing that. We have, cishet white or no, cis white gays doing that to queer men of color. We have gay men doing that to bisexual people and to queer women. We have cis queer folks doing that to trans people, binary trans people doing that to non-binary trans people, non-binary trans people doing that to people with neopronouns. Like we're all just looking at the person who's a little bit smaller than us and saying, this is your fault. No, it's not. We are all up against the same enemy, and Mars is exactly right. We are not going to be able to dress in a way that stops the impact of these laws. We are not like, that's not what it's about. We dress like ourselves so that we can feel good, so that we can feel seen, and recognizing that even if there are places in your life that you don't have the safety to dress as weird as you possibly can, which is okay, right? I live in Missouri and I have road trips sometimes where I drive from St. Louis to North Liberty, Iowa. That is not a road trip in which I'm going to be weird maxing and dressing like as I'd like to live through that road trip. I'm not going to be doing that. So we all get to decide when are our moments of safety, but find the people who you can be that person around, whether it is one friend, whether it is a Zoom call that you set up with some people you've known on social media, whether it is a weekly D&D game where you get to play a character who uses the pronouns that you in your heart know you'd like to use all the time. Where are the spaces where you get to be you? Maybe it's just I come home from work and I know I can't go out to dinner, but I'm going to dress up really nice. When I was a sad, scared trans kid, I was only out to 3 people. And my girlfriend at the time, who was one of those 3, we decided it would be safe to tell her parents I was trans. My parents did not know yet, and they kept her stepdad, who's like 6'2". I, notably, not 6'2". They kept a suit of his around just for me. So I'd come over every Friday. We'd order Domino's, and I'd put on my jacket and my tie over my t-shirt, and they'd call me Mr. Greene and Mr. Ben, and they'd just go ham on the pronouns. And I got to be a fancy boy for a couple of hours every week. And having those little pockets where I felt seen was so important. So find the people who give you a pocket where you get to feel seen, in whatever way you are. And a game that I liked to play as well, whenever I was like, I had to be in the closet, rather than being like, man, it fucking blows that I have to be in the closet right now. Me and my best friend, who was also trans and also in the closet, would call each other and say, this is mission control. Due to the sensitive nature of this mission, you've been assigned a cross-gender undercover identity. And we'd give each other missions at family weddings and gatherings and say, I'm not in, gender dysphoric clothing. I'm in a tactical skirt. God, that was so good for the mission. And all of a sudden, it was a game you can play. You can find whimsy and joy and like find ways to laugh at the shit because it's gonna happen either way. You might as well find a reason to find it a little funny.
We talked about respectability politics too, and a shirt that I released a little while ago says infighting is a tool of the oppressor. And I feel like that's so major right now
Mhm.
is the like fighting over things. And also I think social media, we lose so much nuance. It's so important to hold space for your specific community without tearing down the community of others. Like you can, like Camp Lost Boys, we can go and have a trans man camp and not tear down anybody else. It doesn't mean that because we have our own community, another community is less than, and we can also share resources and put our own mat first, our own gas mask on or air oxygen, not gas mask, oxygen mask on, for our community first, and then build out. But yeah, it's not like a hierarchy. And I think yeah, when we pull back from our own authenticity, it does become a little bit of infighting. I've found in my own experiences.
Thank you so
There's a
much.
book.
I love these responses. I'm sorry, go on.
I was just going to say there's a book everyone should read by a Black trans advocate named Adrienne Marie Brown. She's written a ton of books and she has a brand new one out right now called Loving Corrections. I just got it from the bookstore, so I haven't had a chance to finish it, but it's basically about how can we relate to each other and stop infighting as a community because Republicans are, for better or worse, very united in their goals, and we are very divided in the, well, if you have this liberation, I need this thing, and you can't be called that. And we like the cancel culture as Republicans imagine it does not exist. Cancel culture within the left super duper exists. So this is an outstanding book, and Adrienne Marie Brown is just a brilliant activist that I think everyone should be engaging with their leadership. Great book if you're feeling frustrated about infighting, Loving Corrections.
She
Highly
also has We Will Not Cancel Us, which is
recommend.
another really beautiful book.
Mhm.
Thank you. And I wanted to mention another question that someone sent to me directly a few minutes ago. And let me know if you guys would like me to answer this one. This one asks if there's still time for another question, I'd love to hear people's thoughts on how those of us who are disabled can get involved in local queer organizations, community spaces, and events rather than just interacting on social media. As valuable as social media is, I still feel disconnected because accessibility always seems to be an afterthought, and it's so much more work on me anytime I want to participate in in-person activism or even just go to Pride events. Any ideas how to be involved offline without totally exhausting myself?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this too because I'm in a relationship and I figured out that I have ADHD, my partner is autistic, and the ways that we can engage in activism is like very opposite. And I think we were talking about like really niched in communities, really like hyper focusing. I think right now is a time to recognize like what is your unique strength. You don't have to do everything. If you can't attend a protest, maybe it's too overstimulating. Can you make a Google Doc at home to help the organizers? How can we? I've seen a lot of this also in the LA has done an amazing job with the mutual aid for the fires. People are really locking into what their thing is that they can do. Maybe with me, ADHD, I have a lot of energy. I can really get out and I can really mobilize. And for my partner, she can really hold space and really create grounding energy and calm focus. And both of us are not good at the other one. And we don't have to do the other one, right? But we can come together as a community and come together even in our small partnership and do things. Yeah, I think a lot of the times we hear activism and especially with cancel culture, it's like if you're not doing everything just this way and just this right and holding on and doing all of it for everybody all the time, then you're not good enough. I just want to really like pull that back. Like, and also realistically too, if you are a queer or trans person, especially a trans person, which I think a lot of us are on this call right now, you're already doing so much activism just by being fucking alive, just by like waking up every day and being yourself, even if you're not out to any person in the whole world, even if you're not even dressing nothing, even if you've done nothing, you are still an activist by just being here. So you don't need to feel guilty all the time that I'm not doing enough, I'm not here enough. You're doing enough. Relax, love yourself, and we will come together. And when you feel resourced enough and when you have time and when you have the energy, call and we can organize together. And until then, if you don't worry about it. Just literally survive the next 4 years. Like you're great and you're amazing as you are.
100% want to lift that up. And there, I really like what you said around like, what are the skills that you have? People have this idea that an activist is someone with fist raised at the front line of a protest or testifying at the Capitol, and those are the options of what it means to be an activist. And that is not the case. There are so many different things that help us build the world we want to see. So that includes, helping organize mutual aid spreadsheets so people can access resources. That includes talking to parents who are struggling to support their kids or donating. Like there are so many different ways this can look. There's a book I really want to recommend called Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice, that talks the author of that book, I believe, is non-binary. It's been a couple of years since my last read through. Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice, really phenomenal book around what does advocacy look like in the disability community. It's going to look different for everybody depending on what your needs are, what your spoons are, what your local community's needs are. Find people who are in a similar boat as you. So, for example, here in St. Louis, we've got an organization called COVID Cautious Queers. It's a Facebook group that we use to organize COVID safe events for people who are disabled. And also, like, COVID is still very real and very much a threat to all of our health. Highly recommend not pretending that it's not. Off my soapbox of that. But so finding the people who are organizing in a way that you want to organize, because they're so likely are, even if they're not like at the front line of the movement. Yeah, finding other people who are going through it similarly. And Ariane, you mentioned that you had something that you wanted to add as well. I encourage you to do so because we are
Oh,
not certainly the only two experts on here.
oh, thank you. Yeah, I was just offering just because I spent 6 years working for the Disabled Students Programs and Services at Fresno City College. So, and that said, I don't necessarily have great answers because like our struggle has was always, we're always just venting basically about how inaccessible social media is for a lot of people with visual disabilities, with hearing disabilities. A lot of people are not putting captions on their videos or they're not putting alt text on their images. And so it's really difficult for a lot of people to interact with social media or to understand what's happening when, where, and to be in the know because of how inaccessible most people posting to social media are. People who are not being mindful of everyone else. And the thing that I have found that helps me personally the most is just signing up for email newsletters from those organizations that you're trying to keep in contact with, who are doing your local Pride events and who are doing local activism, because emails are mostly text-based and most devices have a software program on them that will read the text to you. So whether you are someone who can't hear or who can't see, email is usually the best accessible way to get the content that you need and to get that information and to stay in the know. And that's really the only advice I have figured out so far because most of us just spend our time venting about how inaccessible everything is. That
I
said, I
can't.
have had the pleasure of going to some prides that are really cool. One that I went to that was really accessible was Orange County Pride. It's a small pride. They just did their first big version in like an actual event center last year. The organizing needs a lot of improvement, but for the people attending, they did some pretty cool things where they provided headsets for people who have hearing sensitivity. And they also provided, instead of having just like loud, music pumping out everywhere, they had stations where you could go get headsets and so people who want to listen to loud music can hear that loud music, while the rest of us, who, like myself, I struggle to hear. And it made it a lot easier for me to talk to, I was selling art at the festival, and it made it so much easier for me as a person with disabilities trying to, out there trying to make that money, to finally be able to actually hear the people I'm talking to and have conversations with my clients and customers. And so that was just a really cool Pride event. And I can't think of an event at the top of my head that was more accessible. But there are some that are accessible and some that are not. And it took me some trial and error of going to various Pride festivals before I found the ones where I'm like, this is the one that if I was a attendee, I would come back to it.
Yeah, I can't last. I know we're at the end, but I can't highlight enough the importance of joining people's emails. It's very important for the organizations. It's very important for like creators like me, and also in terms of like internet and data safety. Like that way, you're giving your data directly to the person that you want to, because at the end of the day, your email is your data. It's your name. It's access to a lot of things. And if TikTok goes away, like it does again, I could never see you again. And TikTok owned that data. So signing up for emails, even though it's annoying, checking your email, like emails are so crucial right now. I would just, I know you get so many spam emails. Unsubscribe to the spammy ones and really lock into the cool ones.
That said, can you both make sure your email? I see that Ben's email newsletter is in there. Mars, if you could also throw yours in there during these last few minutes. I'm going to leave the room open for a couple more minutes, but we are done with questions for the day. And I want to thank everyone so much for joining us. And I really want to thank our panelists, Ben and Mars, so much for being here with us today, for being such wonderful panelists. And I really appreciate both of you and everything that you've been doing. So I'm going to give it some more time so that Mars can have a chance to put his email in here for us. If you don't know already, Mars is an incredible artist and Ben is an incredible writer. So I really recommend signing up for them because they have so much to give.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. And, listen, I'll end my piece with this last little bit of hope. I know the world seems scary, and I know when we look at social media and the news, it feels like everybody has picked a side and everybody is angry and helpful or hateful. But I got to tell you, I travel so much. I speak in a lot of places, rural Georgia, rural Iowa. I did a webinar a little bit ago in Russia where all the parents joined under pseudonyms so they didn't get caught supporting their trans kids, but they came anyway. We had like 100 people on that webinar between Russia and Turkey. So many people I meet constantly are curious, are compassionate, want to see a better world. I expect hate constantly, and I go everywhere and I do not find it. Doesn't mean it's not out there. There are cruel people. I know there are cruel people. And for every one person who is cruel and very loud about it, there are 20 who are kind or curious or just open or pleasantly neutral, right? We will get to the world that we want to see. Nobody's coming to save us. Nobody's coming to build that world for us, but we are going to get there. I am steadfast, unshaking in my hope that we are going to get to that better world.
And also, again, I said it earlier, but attending this, getting on the email, signing up, showing up today, like this is such important, crucial work that you've already done. So give yourself such a big round of applause because you
Mm,
did do the work of building real community offline. You did do the work. Like this is activism is for us to come together off of social
mm.
media. And don't lose that momentum. Keep it coming. And yeah, I'm just so grateful that all of you are here. Thanks for coming.
Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much, everybody.
everyone. Thank you so much. And everyone, I'm going to send you all an email with a link to today's feedback form for today. So please fill out that survey. It helps us figure out how to do better. I also put a link to it in the chat. So please do that. And thank you all so much for coming today. And thank you again, Ben and Mars, for being here with us. We really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Paulina.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.